For decades, the United States stood at the center of the global economy, shaping international trade, technological innovation, and financial markets. Many assumed that position would remain unchallenged for generations. But today's world tells a different story. A quieter transformation is unfolding, one driven not by a single event, but by years of economic growth, technological progress, and expanding trade partnerships across emerging markets. Countries that were once viewed primarily as manufacturing hubs are now becoming leaders in advanced industries, digital innovation, and global investment. At the same time, businesses and governments are building new trade relationships that extend far beyond traditional Western markets. Economic influence is becoming more widely distributed, creating a world where multiple regional powers play increasingly important roles. This doesn't necessarily mean the United States is disappearing from the global stage. Rather, it suggests that international leadership is becoming more competitive and more complex. Understanding this shift is essential for investors, businesses, and policymakers alike, because the next decade may be defined less by the dominance of a single superpower and more by the rise of a truly multipolar global economy. For much of the modern era, the United States occupied a unique position in the global economy. It was the world's largest consumer market, the center of international finance, and home to many of the most influential technology companies. The US dollar became the dominant reserve currency, while American institutions played a central role in shaping global trade and investment. This combination of economic strength and financial influence gave Washington enormous leverage over international affairs. Today, that foundation remains significant, but the global economy has become far more competitive than it was 30 years ago. One of the biggest reasons is the rapid growth of emerging markets. Countries across Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and parts of Africa have expanded their industrial capacity, improved infrastructure, and invested heavily in education and technology. As incomes have risen, these economies have also become important consumer markets, rather than simply production centers. At the same time, globalization has redistributed manufacturing around the world. Industries that were once concentrated in North America increasingly shifted production to countries with lower labor costs and expanding industrial capabilities. Over time, these nations didn't just manufacture products. They developed their own engineering expertise, supply chains, research facilities, and globally competitive companies. Another major factor is demographics. Many emerging economies possess younger populations and growing workforces, creating larger domestic markets and increasing long-term economic potential. While developed nations face aging populations and slower labor force growth, many developing countries continue expanding their productive capacity. Trade patterns have also evolved dramatically. Businesses no longer rely on a single dominant market. Companies increasingly diversify suppliers, customers, and investment destinations to reduce geopolitical risk and improve resilience. This has encouraged stronger economic ties among emerging economies themselves, reducing dependence on traditional Western markets. Technology has further accelerated this transition. Digital platforms, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and advanced manufacturing tools allow companies in developing economies to compete globally much faster than previous generations could. Innovation is no longer confined to Silicon Valley or a handful of Western technology hubs. None of these developments suggest that the United States is losing its importance. American financial markets remain among the world's deepest and most liquid, while U.S. universities, technology firms, and entrepreneurs continue driving innovation across numerous industries. However, leadership today looks different from leadership 20 years ago. Instead of one economy overwhelmingly dominating global commerce, multiple economic centers now contribute to innovation, investment, manufacturing, and international trade. This gradual redistribution of economic activity is creating a more balanced and often more competitive global marketplace. Perhaps no country illustrates this transformation more clearly than China. Several decades ago, China was primarily viewed as the world's manufacturing workshop. International companies moved factories there to reduce production costs, taking advantage of abundant labor and rapidly expanding industrial zones. At first, much of this activity focused on assembling products designed elsewhere. That picture has changed dramatically. Today, China invests enormous resources into research, advanced manufacturing, semiconductor development, renewable energy, robotics, biotechnology, aerospace, electric vehicles, and artificial intelligence. Rather than simply producing goods for foreign companies, Chinese firms increasingly design, engineer, and market their own products worldwide. Artificial intelligence provides a useful example of this evolution. The race to develop increasingly capable AI systems has become one of the defining technological competitions of the decade. While American companies remain global leaders, Chinese developers have significantly narrowed the gap through sustained investment, strong engineering talent, and extensive domestic markets that allow rapid deployment of new technologies. Competition is also expanding beyond proprietary systems. Open source AI models have created opportunities for developers around the world to build applications without relying exclusively on expensive commercial platforms. This trend demonstrates that technological leadership is becoming more distributed rather than concentrated in a single country. China's progress extends well beyond software. The country has become a dominant force in electric vehicle production, battery manufacturing, solar panels, wind turbines, and critical mineral processing. These industries are increasingly important as governments pursue cleaner energy systems and modernize transportation infrastructure. Infrastructure investment has also strengthened China's international influence. Through ports, railways, logistics hubs, and industrial projects across multiple continents, Chinese companies have established commercial relationships that often extend far beyond simple trade. Supporters argue these investments promote economic development and improve regional connectivity. Critics raise concerns about debt sustainability, strategic dependence, and geopolitical influence. Regardless of one's perspective, the scale of these projects demonstrates China's growing role in shaping international commerce. Importantly, technological competition today is no longer limited to one industry. Success increasingly depends on integrated ecosystems involving education, manufacturing, research, finance, supply chains, and access to global markets. Countries capable of combining these strengths gain significant long-term advantages. For investors and businesses, this means innovation can emerge from multiple regions simultaneously. Breakthrough technologies are no longer guaranteed to originate from one country or one economic bloc. The future of global innovation is becoming increasingly multipolar. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe to Geoeconomics for fact-based insights into global markets, geopolitics, and economic trends. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's continue exploring today's topic. Trade has always been one of the clearest indicators of shifting economic power. Over the past 2 decades, global trade relationships have become far more diversified than many people realize. Rather than depending primarily on a single economic partner, countries increasingly pursue broader commercial relationships across multiple regions. This diversification reflects both opportunity and necessity. Businesses seek larger customer bases, more reliable supply chains, and access to critical raw materials. Governments, meanwhile, aim to reduce vulnerability by expanding trade beyond traditional alliances. Asia has become a central driver of this transformation. Rapid economic growth throughout the region has encouraged stronger commercial ties among neighboring economies. Manufacturing networks now stretch across multiple countries, allowing companies to source components, assemble products, and distribute goods through highly interconnected supply chains. Meanwhile, Latin America has become increasingly important for agriculture, mining, energy production, and critical minerals essential for advanced technologies. Africa's expanding consumer markets and abundant natural resources are attracting growing international investment. The Middle East continues diversifying beyond oil while investing heavily in logistics, finance, and technology. As these regions become more interconnected, trade flows naturally evolve. Rather than moving exclusively between developing countries and Western markets, commerce increasingly occurs directly among emerging economies themselves. This phenomenon is sometimes referred to as South-South trade, reflecting growing economic cooperation outside traditional trade corridors. Currency arrangements are also slowly changing. Although the US dollar remains the dominant international currency, several countries have explored conducting portions of bilateral trade using local currencies. These initiatives remain relatively limited compared to dollar-based commerce, but they illustrate broader efforts to diversify financial relationships. Digital commerce is accelerating these trends. E-commerce platforms, digital payment systems, improved logistics, and modern telecommunications enable companies of all sizes to reach international customers more efficiently than ever before. Small and medium-sized businesses now participate in global markets that previously favored only multinational corporations. For multinational firms, adapting to these evolving trade networks requires greater flexibility. Companies increasingly evaluate geopolitical risks alongside traditional business considerations such as labor costs, transportation infrastructure, taxation, and consumer demand. Supply chain resilience has become as important as production efficiency. The result is a global trading system that is becoming more complex, more interconnected, and more competitive than at any point in recent history. As global competition intensifies, U.S. policymakers have increasingly adjusted both economic and foreign policy strategies to protect long-term national interests. One major priority has been strengthening domestic manufacturing capacity. Recent years have seen significant investment initiatives aimed at expanding semiconductor production, advanced manufacturing, clean energy technologies, and critical infrastructure. These efforts seek to reduce dependence on overseas supply chains while improving economic resilience. Supply chain security has become another central concern. Events ranging from global pandemics to geopolitical tensions exposed vulnerabilities in highly concentrated production networks. As a result, governments and corporations alike have explored strategies such as reshoring, nearshoring, and supplier diversification. Trade policy has also evolved. Rather than focusing exclusively on tariff reduction, modern trade agreements increasingly address digital commerce, intellectual property, environmental standards, cybersecurity, and technology cooperation. National security considerations now play a much larger role in economic decision-making than they did several decades ago. Critical technologies, including semiconductors, artificial intelligence, telecommunications infrastructure, quantum computing, and advanced manufacturing, are increasingly viewed as strategic assets with implications extending beyond commercial competition. International partnerships remain an important component of American strategy. The United States continues working closely with long-standing allies while expanding cooperation on technology, investment screening, infrastructure development, and supply chain resilience. At the same time, policymakers face the challenge of balancing economic openness with strategic competition. Globalization created tremendous economic opportunities, but it also increased interdependence between major economies. Managing that interdependence requires careful coordination between economic objectives and national security priorities. Businesses must navigate this changing environment as well. Investment decisions increasingly consider regulatory uncertainty, export controls, sanctions, geopolitical tensions, and evolving international standards. Companies operating across multiple jurisdictions often need sophisticated risk management strategies alongside traditional financial planning. Ultimately, America's response reflects recognition that the global economy has entered a new phase. Rather than assuming a single dominant center of economic activity, policymakers increasingly operate within a world characterized by multiple influential economies, competing technological ecosystems, and rapidly evolving international partnerships. Understanding these adjustments provides essential context for the growing strategic importance of regions that were once considered secondary players in the global economy, including Latin America, which has become an increasingly significant arena for investment, resources, manufacturing, and geopolitical influence.